Well, good evening, folks. It's Sunday, the 14th of April, and it's 9:07 p.m. my time. And this little podcast has been on my mind to do for about a month now. I just haven't gotten around to it. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do this. I don't know if it was, too personal or anything like that, but it's really not that personal. It's just something that happened and I wanted to share it. So this is about synchronicity. And synchronicity is a fascinating concept. I don't think it's the correct word. It's a word that comes from the Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst, who was I don't know, an interesting fellow, but um, I'm not sure. I think the study of the psyche has any real value for the human race. At least not the way that it's done by psychiatry and psychology. I mean, it can help in certain instances, but in many instances, it's just not effective at all. I view consciousness as an entirely spiritual phenomenon. But please don't throw me on the dung heap of superstition or call me a Luddite or anything like that. I have my reasons for believing what I believe or for knowing what I know. You see, when you know something that you can't prove to other people, we call it a belief. So I say, I believe in synchronicity, or I believe that consciousness is an entirely spiritual phenomenon. I say believe because it's a social convention, but in fact, I know it. And I know it as a result of years of investigation, self-inquiry, and spiritual exercise and practice. It absolutely is entirely a spiritual phenomenon. And psychiatry and its companion, pharmacy, is, I think, one of the most diabolical things ever introduced to the human race. I'm not trying to offend people who have gone to therapy for years, whether that be one-on-one with a psychoanalyst or a psychologist or a counselor, or group therapy in the form of Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous or any of those sorts of things. I think that's very positive, actually, to externalize your inner feelings in a group that is safe. And I think therapy has value. I'm talking about the core of the science of psychiatry and specifically neuroscience and again, all of the attendant pharmacy that goes with it, all of the chemicals they put into the body. I think it's extremely irresponsible, and that's the best case scenario. Worst case is it's intentional and they're trying to destroy or suppress consciousness. But I don't want to get conspiratorial. As I said today, or tonight, I just want to do a little short podcast on synchronicity. So on March 12th, I went into the jungle about almost exactly a month ago. Now, I've been in the jungle before on day trips. For those of you who don't know, I live in southern Costa Rica in the Talamanca Mountains. And I'm about 7 kilometers up a dirt road. And then the native reserve is about another, depending what part of the reserve you go to, it's anywhere from 5 to 7 kilometers more. Most of which you can walk on, I guess we'll call it a road. I mean, some really well-equipped 4x4s can get up there and an ATV can get up there. But a normal vehicle and even a normal 4x4 that hasn't been raised and doesn't have special treaded tires on it can't get back there. A motorcycle can't get back there. It's horseback, ATV, or walking for the most part. Now, prior to this, I had been up to the reserve at the entrance of the reserve once or twice. And in one instance, I drove my Suzuki Samurai with my wife and my son in the car and one of our dogs. And it was able to get up there, but it was really rough. And a Suzuki Samurai is almost like a big all-terrain vehicle, right? It's almost like an ATV. It's only got a 1300 cc engine. Some of the side-by-sides they make now have bigger engines than a Suzuki Samurai. But the interesting thing about a Suzuki Samurai is it may be the best and most authentic 4x4 ever made. Okay. Anybody who lives in a place where 4x4s are actually needed, and they're not driven for style, will tell you that the Suzuki Samurai is about the best 4x4 you can get. But even with that, it was very difficult to get all the way back there. And at certain stages of the journey, we couldn't go any more than like 10 kilometers an hour, and had to be very careful because the bumps and stuff were so severe that you'd scrape the undercarriage of the vehicle. So walking, horseback, or ATV. And I had been up to the reserve once on horseback as well. But those were day trips where we just spent about, I don't know, about an hour on the reserve. And my wife wanted to introduce me to certain people that she had grown up with up there. As a Costa Rican living in the jungle, she had become very familiar with the native tribe and in accepted into the tribe. They call her a sister. And so this is a very unique opportunity for me to spend time with these people. The name of the tribe is the Quebecer. It sounds like somebody from the province of Quebec. If you're Canadian, the pronunciation is almost exactly the same. Quebecer. It's actually pronounced or spelled Cabecare. And so just reading it, it would sound like Cape Care. But the way they say it is Quebecer. And they're an absolutely fascinating people. They have a huge reserve. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. It's a UNESCO heritage site for its environmental unique qualities. It's probably, I'm just guessing here. I'm not a botanist or anything like that, or an environmentalist. But I would have no problem saying that it is probably the most biodiverse 1,000 square kilometers on the planet. And there's reasons for that. It's a mountain range and a very, very large mountain range. And over here, the mountain ranges in the Talamanca are completely covered in trees. At the highest peak, the greenery changes more to an evergreen. You almost get like an Ontario or a Michigan landscape. And it does get quite cold up there at the highest mountain peak in Costa Rica. You can have snow. It's called Mount Charipo, I think, on the Pacific coast. So it's on the other side of Costa Rica, but it's the same mountain range that I live in, the Talamanca Mountains. Now the Talamanca Mountains are uninhabited except for the natives. And there are some people who live a little way into the mountain, like myself and my wife and her family and a few other families up here. But it's increasingly becoming an antiquated way of living. And the generation after my wife, who is 50 years old, all the children and her son and her nieces and nephews from her brothers and sisters, a family of 11 kids that were raised up here, pretty much subsistence living, or not, what is the word I'm looking for? Pretty much everything they needed was up here. They had their own fruit, they had their own eggs, they hunted, and when they needed a little bit of money, they would cut wood and sell wood, but that's illegal now. But that's what my father-in-law used to do. He passed away about 4 years ago now, at the age of 87. Incredible guy. Had 11 kids up here. And my wife lived up close to the reserve for a number of years when she was raising her son. And this is when she got very, very close to the natives. Now, I want to talk about this, but I don't want to sound too fruity. I realize that's not maybe the best word to use, but I can't think of anything more apt right now. I don't want to, I don't want to, put these people up on a pedestal or sound like some new age flake in San Francisco or anything like that. That said, the Quebecer are a mystical people, absolutely a mystical people. When you live immersed in nature, you live completely differently and you evolve as a consciousness completely differently than somebody raised in a city. And you can't fake it. You can't do shamanic rituals in Ohio and pretend you're a shaman. You're not, okay? The principal quality of a shaman is that they live in nature. Okay. No offense to all the people making hundreds of $1,000s a year as urban shaman, guiding deluded millennials and Gen Z people on ayahuasca, peyote, mushroom, and ibogaine trips, which is a popular, very, very popular thing here in Costa Rica. No offense to those people. Okay. You do what you do, you make your living, but don't call yourself a shaman. You're not a shaman. Okay. Shamans live in nature. And almost everyone in the Quebecer tribe is a shaman if they're adult and they've been raised up there. So March 12th, I had the unique opportunity to go and live on the reserve for a couple days. My son was visiting. I had a friend from New York here, and my son had a friend from Portland, Oregon here. I myself and my son are both from Toronto, Canada. Um, So our guide, Eduardo, came to pick us up, and he came to my house and we met him and we walked back to his house. It took about 90 minutes. It was about 6 kilometers. We took a shortcut through the jungle. But it was unbelievably difficult, the walk. I mean, you think you're in shape. I mean, I don't have any delusions about being a marathon runner or anything, but I never had any doubt about my ability to walk, 5, 10, 15, even 20 kilometers in a day. And I can, provided that walk is on flat land. When you go back into the jungle there, you're either going down or you're going up. And both are very, very hard on the legs. So you start to get real rubber leg after about an hour. I thought I was going to lose my legs completely. I thought I was going to lose my ability to walk. My legs were going to give out. That's how intense the walk was for me. Um, when you start walking into the jungle, like where I live right now, if anything happened, provided your vehicle started, you'd be okay. So if you got bit by a snake, anything that required medical attention, I'm about 40 minutes from the closest town. Get down the mountain and get to the town, I'm about 40 minutes. 30, one town is about maybe 35 minutes away, and the main hospital is about 40, 45 minutes away. It's in a town called Securis. So you feel, when I first moved up here, I felt very remote and it was very invigorating. And now not so much since I've been to the reserve. So when you're walking with Eduardo, when you start the walk, you're going past places you know. So we go down the road a little bit. I pass some of my neighbors, Costa Rican neighbors. They're all campesinos up here. Campesino is the Spanish word for peasant, which means they're sustenance living. Okay, they're very, very poor people, monetarily poor. Let me qualify that because there's many kinds of poverty. They don't have a lot of disposable income, but their life is as rich as anybody's, if not richer, in my opinion. And then you cut off the road and you go through a farmer's field and you pass some cows and things like this. And then when that farmer's field is done, when you've crossed the farmer's field, which is fairly big, it's about a kilometer, you go right into the jungle and there's a path. And the path is about maybe 18 or 24 inches wide, and it's just really maintained by people continually walking on it, mainly the natives. In fact, exclusively the natives for the most part. And when you first go down the path, it's all fun and games. It's Disney World. It's this. It's a roller coaster ride. You're still in control. You're having an experience. And then after a certain distance, about, halfway through the trip, about 45 minutes, it dawns on you that you are in the middle of nowhere and that the walk is so arduous that if anything were to happen to you, there would be no remedy. You're completely on your own. Okay. Completely on your own. And it's a very sobering thought. Very few people get to experience that now. It must be how explorers felt. It must have been how it felt to, you know, get on a merchant marine ship in 1720 or something and go on one of the trade routes. But even that's not completely comparable because the boat would have medicine, the boat would have a doctor, the boat, and if push came to shove, you know, they could sail inland and get you to proper medical attention. And you could lie down the whole time because you're in a boat. I'm trying to think of what else. I suppose the early explorers, or to use the parlance of our time, the colonialists who came to North America had a similar experience, going through the woods. And if anything happens, it just happens. And there was that, phenomenal Leonardo DiCaprio movie. Um, I forget the title of it, but he plays a Scotsman by the name of Hugh Glass, who gets mauled by a bear in northern Canada and left for dead, and it's quite a story. I can't believe I can't remember the name right now, but that's what happened. And so as you continue to walk, you you begin to realize that this is life. And this has been life for all of the time human beings have been on this planet. Okay? And the same feeling persists when you get to Eduardo's house. There's a clearing, he's got his fruit trees, he's got his animal pens, his pigs and stuff like that, some chickens in the middle of the jungle. And a lot of dogs, because you need a lot of dogs because predators will come in for your animals at night and you need a warning system. And that's what dogs have habitually been for human beings since the beginning of time. And we settled into his home, and it was one of the houses was a fairly new construction. It was a bungalow on posts, like a two-bedroom bungalow on posts made with wood, zinc roof, but very, very nice, very, very nicely done, nice windows. All of the construction material was portaged in. And that when I heard that, I just almost couldn't believe it. The walk alone with just maybe a 5 pound pack on my back with a couple extra pairs of socks and an extra pair of underwear and a few things in my backpack. I found that heavy. And everything that was used to build that home was portaged from where we started at my home. So that would include large pieces of zinc for the roof, all the wood, including the posts, 25-kilogram bags of cement, all of it portaged in on somebody's back, and they just walk the 6 or 7 kilometers carrying that. Down hills, up hills. I mean, the physicality of it. We hear all these incredible stories, we love these podcasters now, like the Navy SEALs and stuff, Jocko and Sean Ryan and stuff like this. But what I saw going on physically on that reserve was supernatural. It was beyond anything you could imagine. And the only reason they could demonstrate that strength and that persistence and that perseverance in a task like carrying a 25-kilogram bag of cement 7 kilometers through the jungle and then coming back and getting another one and doing that trip maybe 3, 4 times in a day. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's the only reason they can do it is nobody told them they can't. They haven't been watching any TV. You know what I mean? Just absolutely astounding. Okay. And they're not big people, you know. Eduardo might be 145 pounds, and he can go through the jungle for days on end with a 100-pound backpack full of supplies and ammo because he's a park ranger. Okay. Unbelievable. And he makes camp wherever he finds place. They absolutely love the rainforest. The Quebecer and the rainforest are one. You know, they know our world exists. Some of them leave, but they end up going back after a couple of years. Okay. They don't do well if they leave the reserve, and I understand why now. Because when you've had that natural way of living, you don't want to live unnaturally. And the way we live is unnatural. It is unnatural. Okay. So, what impressed me most when we got to the reserve was the independence of his life. It was himself, his wife, and 2 kids. And one of the babies was, I think, about 2 years old. And his son is about 7 or 8 years old. And there's his wife, and there's him. And they have their neighbors in the tribe, you know, but they don't live congregated in one area the way some native tribes do. You know, the next closest neighbor to Eduardo might be, uh, for me, an hour and a half, 2 hours through the jungle in another direction. For Eduardo, 45 minutes. He can walk twice as fast as us. Okay. And we spent 2 days there, and Eduardo explained his role in the tribe. So he was the keeper of one of the burial mounds. Okay. And we walked in on the 12th, pretty much relaxed on the 12th. I think we did one walk down to the river and we went for a swim in the river. It was a bit brisk, you know, gets a bit chill up in the mountains, even in Costa Rica, even this close to the equator. I mean, elevation always produces cooler temperatures. And then we were so exhausted, we just spent the day in hammocks in the roundhouse. And the roundhouse itself was just an unbelievable experience, the energy in it. And Eduardo's home is right on top of the burial ground. You know, all that stuff they say in the horror movies, native burial grounds. Well, I slept on one for 2 days. On the 13th of March, Eduardo took us for a short hike, about 30 minutes, and we went to one of the oldest burial mounds. And the Quebecer use stones to represent a life, and they find round stones. They have to be round. There can't be any sharp edges to them. They don't have to be circular, but they have to be ovular. And they pile them on top of one another. Now, the Quebecer have been back there. Nobody knows for sure. Eduardo says, and his cousin Ishmael says the same thing. At least 100 generations, maybe 200. Okay. And they go back to all of the native culture that was prior to the incursion of the Spanish. Now, this is a history I didn't really understand, never studied it. Why would you study Spanish history and Spanish colonialism in a Canadian high school? I studied Canadian colonialism and the French and the English coming over to Canada. But the Spanish colonized Central and South America and Mexico. And they were in many ways even more brutal than the English or the French. I mean, none of the European colonizers were gentle. It was, you know, like submit to our will or we'll kill you. And we're probably going to kill you anyways. And let's be honest about this. And I'm not trying to go woke here. I'm not trying to light a fire, but we're not going to get anywhere if we don't tell the truth. And that is the truth. We came to this continent, America, from Europe, and we murdered a lot of people. Okay? A lot of people. And it was their land, and they had found a way to live on it. And the way they had found to live on it was, in my opinion, very beautiful. So on the 13th, we went to this sacred site and we stood in front of this burial mound, and the stones were piled in a kind of a pyramid shape. And we had to look up to see the top. So it probably went up about 12 feet. And the actual size of it was about 100 meters, was probably the 50 meters was the radius, 100 meters was the diameter. So that's a big mound of stones. And that was only one burial mound the Kabakar had. They're all over the place. They've probably been back there about 10,000 years. So we're talking about going right back to the oldest times on this planet, okay? Living the way their ancestors had lived and continuing with the same ritual culture. There was a feeling and a vibration to this burial mound that I've never felt in my life. I almost felt as though I could hear the stones speaking to me. A little bit like that little whisper that I don't want to make this sound like a negative experience, but a little bit like that whisper chatter when anybody would pick up the ring in the Lord of the Rings and they would hear, Sauron like that. But it wasn't frightening. It was just kind of there like a background noise, but you could feel it. And Eduardo knew we could feel it. And he just sat back, watched us. Okay. And he told us the story. And he told us what his job was. One of his jobs is, he's a paid park ranger, and that involves all kinds of stuff. And he's a one-man operation. There's, there's no calling for backup out there. Now, because of that, he's allowed to have any kind of weapon he deems necessary. So he's got everything you could imagine, automatic machine guns and, just incredibly sophisticated military-grade hardware. Why would you need that as a park guard? And this would be, for those of you who know Costa Rica, this would be one of the least visited national parks in Costa Rica because there's no ready access to it. And this is the Barbilia National Park, okay, down in the south, down in the province of Limon. Now, the province I live in is known as, how would I say this without sounding, it's where all the narco traffickers live, and that is because of the Port of Limon. Okay, the Port of Limon is where all the bananas and pineapples leave, and they go all over the world. I saw a Del Monte boat parked in the Port of Limon one time. It's the biggest boat I've ever seen in my life. I mean, it was at least 15 or 20 football fields long. I mean, would that almost be a kilometer long? That might be a bit long. Yeah, I might be exaggerating there. At least 500 meters long and 100 meters across. It's literally the biggest boat I've ever seen in my life. So if you live in a city, I would say it was the equivalent of like 5 condominium buildings, 20 stories high, stacked together. That's how big it was. And that's how they get the coke out, right? That's how they get the cocaine out. 80% of the cocaine in Europe comes from the Port of Limon in Costa Rica. Okay. So there is tourism down in the province of Limon. We have a very, very incredible little town called Puerto Viejo, the old port, down on the Caribbean side. And there's an interesting and eclectic group of expats down there and a lot of tourism down there. Curiously, given, the fact that I live in the narco trafficker province of Limon, Puerto Viejo is internationally known as a gay-friendly vacation spot. So when you go to Puerto Viejo, you see a lot of gay men and women couples, and That's nice. And that's fairly safe. I mean, the tourist zones are very well policed, right? Although they've had some problems in Puerto Viejo in the last 5 or 7 years. Some very ugly stuff has happened there, you know. And then other than that, there's just not that much tourism in this province. There's a little bit further up on the Atlantic side doing with having to do with the mating season of the turtles, the sea turtles. They come up on the beach and lay their eggs, and people will go and see that. Um, but other than that, not a whole lot of tourism. Most of the expatriates and tourists who come to Costa Rica, they go to what we call the Central Valley, or they go north to Guanacaste up around the Nicaraguan border. And they have some very beautiful Pacific beaches there on the Pacific Ocean. So what Eduardo would have to deal with, there's all kinds of stuff. One of the things are poachers. So people will come in with dynamite and throw it into the river and fish out all the fish and sell them. Okay, that's one of the ways they make money. He has to arrest those people. Now, this is one guy, he might come up against a group of 4 or 5 people, and he has to make the arrest in the middle of the jungle and then walk them out and turn them over to the Costa Rican police. No small task, okay? And then you've got a lot of cocaine growing going on now in Costa Rica. They finally figured out that this is a perfect place to grow cocaine. They don't need Colombia anymore. So there's a lot of growing going on in the mountains behind me where I live. Not a lot, but there are cocaine plantations and cocaine farms there. They have to be very careful though, because most of the surveillance is done by small plane and helicopter, and they go all over the mountains looking for these guys, and they come up every once in a while, and they burn out a small marijuana farm. They find like maybe 50 meters by 50 meters, a few hundred plants, 500 plants or something like that. That happens once in a while up where I live. Literally on the mountain I live, they come up and burn it out sometimes. Some of my neighbors have small pot plantations and stuff like that. And marijuana is still illegal here, but I mean, in Canada it's legal, but you still can't do your own unlicensed operation, right? They basically made marijuana like alcohol now, so you have to have all these licenses and pay these taxes, and the government, as the mafia that it is, has to get its vig, its cut. So this is what Eduardo does, and then his tribal duties are maintaining the tribal burial ground, and that's equally dangerous, and I'll tell you why. As he explained to us as we were standing in front of the burial mound, in the olden days, they used to bury their kings with gold. And no Quebecer will ever dig up a grave for gold. Okay. Even if there's $1 million worth of gold at a single burial site that they could access in 45 minutes of digging, it's sacrosanct to them. They are not in the least moved by the temptation to dig up gold from one of their own burial sites and sell it. So they have to protect the gold. There are certain people who know that there's gold there and they want the gold. So this is something else Eduardo has to deal with. And he was telling us a story about, a number of times his life's been threatened. A lot of times the narco chieftains will, just like in Mexico, they're not just smuggling cocaine anymore. That may be how they started, but in the Mexican cartels are into human trafficking, fentanyl, like anything that you can make money at illegally now. Basically, the cartels are so dark now. We could call them an uninitiated satanic cult. Okay. Um, so Eduardo was telling us that, he's got this problem going on, that there's this one guy, he's been told 3 times. The messengers come up and speak to him, and they say so and so is going to come here, or he's going to send people here, sicarios, to kill you because they want the gold. And Eduardo, he just stands his ground, and he lives alone in the jungle. with a wife and two kids. Okay. And he just says, well, if you want to go for the gold, go for the gold and take your chances. But I'm telling you right now, if you don't kill me, I will kill you or wound you and turn you into the police, but probably kill you. So it's a real old world, old west kind of living. But rather than being a dusty desert town like the Old West, this is a lush, dense rainforest. And I have to say, I don't think anybody could kill a Quebecer on their own land. I have a friend living with me now who's uh, got to be one of the most deployed military people in U.S. history. He's worked with and gone through the training for all the special forces. Okay, such people exist. He's been through Bud's camp with the Navy SEALs. He's been through Green Beret training. He's been through the Delta training, and he's been through the Army Rangers training. All of them, all of the special forces and the military branches. And I asked him. I said, "Do you think anybody could, take on the Quebecer on their own land?" He said, "No way. There's no way. The jungle is so green and so wet. There's not much you could do with napalm. You could not do any kind of satellite or airplane flyovers looking for heat signatures to locate them and send bombs. The only thing you could do is send people into the jungle. And once you go in there, the home team advantage for the people who've been living on that land for 10,000 years is ridiculous. Like I said, the forest and them are one. So we're listening to this story. And by the way, as you get to the reserve, so there's a point you cross in the trek. It's at about the 40-minute mark. And Eduardo turned to us. He said, okay, now we're entering our land. Now, before that, nobody lived there. It's unlivable, really. You couldn't build a farm. You couldn't build a house. You couldn't do anything. The jungle we cut through, the rivers we crossed, and all of this sort of thing. But we got to a sign that had been put up by the Costa Rican authorities, and it just said El sitio de la rey serpiente. Okay, no hay no hay paso. No, you can't pass beyond this point, and the land is called the site of the Rey Serpiente, which is the Serpent King. So I asked him about that, and I said, "Who's the Serpent King?" And he started to explain it, and I'm pretty sure he's describing Quetzalcoatl, right? And they would not know this from TV or movies. This is not like some Westerner pretending to be something as they go through a phase when they're 16, right? He's speaking literally, and he's speaking about a direct connection with this deity, the Serpent King. And I'm going, wow, this is amazing. Okay. And the land we were on was all the land of the Serpent King. Rey Serpiente. Rey means king, and Serpiente is serpent. And this is the gold that the narco traffickers want. And this is why he's in jeopardy, but I don't think he'll ever come to any harm because I just think it's too hard to kill him back there. But it was just a very moving story. Now, as I said at the beginning, this is a story about synchronicity. Okay? So we got home on the 14th. And let me speak about synchronicity. By the way, the walk home was even worse. I mean, going there was about 80% downhill, 20% uphill, and coming back 20% downhill and 80% uphill. So we got home on March 14th, and we got home in the morning. I think we left the reserve at 6 a.m. When you're up there, you get up you get up at 4:30. It's still dark when you wake up. And it's an amazing thing to wake up in a rainforest at 4:30 in the morning, okay? This is not a camping trip. This is not anything I would do with tourists. It's just too dangerous, you know. And we did see a number of snakes going in and a number of snakes coming out. So when you hike the path, Eduardo takes lead, and then when he sees it and he misses nothing, nothing, okay, he calls it out. He goes, "Snake," and you go and there's the snake, and you just walk past it. You don't have to worry about a snake striking you unless you threaten it. It's not going to bother you. But you need to know it's there because the danger is in accidentally stepping on it. Then you're going to get bit. And when you're hiking, you have to wear knee-high rubber boots. You have to wear, as the English call them, knee-high Wellingtons. And that's your best protection, okay? Because the snakes will generally try to bite around your ankle. But the bigger snakes, if they get up to like a meter, and some of the terciopellos can go 2 meters, they can bite right through the rubber of your boot. So there's another thing to consider, right? Amazing. Just absolutely amazing. So the whole experience was mesmerizing, and to hear the story about the Serpent King and the gold and the dangers he faces is just amazing. So a synchronicity, according to the dictionary, is the simultaneous occurrence of events which appear significantly related, but have no discernible causal connection. Okay? I call them divine coincidences, and I call them glitches in the matrix. Okay? Or, you know, or spirit speak is what I sometimes call it. It's where the other side seems to be speaking directly into your reality. What is speaking it, I don't know. I don't know. Sometimes I've had this experience with dead individuals, you know, when I visit a house or something, stay for a weekend, something might speak to me. It might be a relative of the family that's living there who passed on. I can sometimes pick these things up, but I'm nowhere near a medium, nor would I want to be a medium. I think people who open up their psychic centers to that degree are just stupid. It's just a bad life. You don't want to do it. I've known some of the most advanced psychics on the planet. I've worked on these things with books, and I wouldn't wish your psychic centers open on my worst enemy. Okay? And most people I know who have their psychic centers fully open, they regret it after time, and they can't really get them closed. So be very careful as you get into these occult practices, right? What doors you open, because you might not be able to close those doors. So we got home on the 14th, and everybody went and did their own thing. You know, my son and my buddy from New York and my son's buddy from Portland, they went back to their rooms in the back building. And I was up in the front here. I showered, changed my clothes, freshened up. I sat down at my beautiful Mac computer here, and I said, okay, I'm going to watch a bit of TV. And I cracked open um, one of the sites I watch TV on, and a new series had been just released. And it's comes out of Mexico. It's a Netflix series, and it's called Bandidos, and you can look this up. And here's the description. A quirky hustler recruits a gang of skilled misfits to find the Snake King's treasure in the Maya Riviera. That, ladies and gentlemen, is a synchronicity. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review.